Hello and welcome to 5, perhaps, surprising truths about what demotivates the team members within your dental practice. If we think about the meaning of the word to motivate, it is to cause behavior. So we're looking to motivate people in doing a specific behavior. In this situation then, we're wanting to cause people to engage in behavior that contributes to the success of your dental practice. This video is actually about 5 ways in which you will demotivate your people by engaging in these behaviors. The first behavior is doing it for them. Okay? First behavior that demotivates people is doing it for them. What? Yes. This normally comes from one of 3 places as to why leaders do this. The first one is that you perhaps a really fast-paced person and actually the other person is just doing it too slowly and it's taking too much time, and also that you haven't got the time to be teaching them or helping them how to do it. Right? So you do it for them. The second one is coming from a place of you're really concerned about relationships, you want to support your people and build really good bonds with your people. And so you end up doing it for them to show your support for that person. And then the third place is where you really have high control requirements, needs, which is you like to be in control and you therefore want to make sure it's done in the way that you want it to be done. And these are the typical 3 ways in which people come from in terms of doing it for the other person. The problem with this is that it ultimately says to the other person that you have no confidence in their ability to do the job. You might not be thinking this, or that might not be how you feel, but actually this is the message that they will take from this, is that you have no confidence in them to do that specific task, and it's quite possible they will take that more broadly into thinking that you don't have any confidence in them to do the job as a whole. This therefore means they are highly unlikely to be proactive in any of their behavior and to really proactively contribute to the success of the practice. They'll be waiting for you to do it for them. Not only that, but of course there's the time burden it places on you as the leader to actually do it for them. So doing it for them demotivates people. How do you avoid this? Well, the first step is awareness. Be aware that that's what you're doing, that you're actually doing it for the other person, and interrupt that. Now, how do you do that? A way of trying to help you do that is to actually change your time perspective. So when you're thinking about time over a longer period. Because when you think about time over a longer period, you'll see that actually if you help the person to do it themselves now, it's going to really reduce the amount of time that is required over a longer period. And think about it from the other person's perspective. What are you telling them by you doing it yourself? That they can't do it, that only you can do it? It's a bit arrogant, right? So really think about this in terms of awareness of you doing it for the other person. And finally, I'd really encourage you to just let go and let the other person do it. Behavior number 1, doing it for them, that demotivates people. Behavior number 2 is not giving feedback. Yes, feedback is critical to the overall success of a practice, and it's especially important to give feedback to individuals. The problem is we just don't give it the time that's required. We don't notice enough, and we don't take time enough to give feedback to the individual. And it's just so important to enable us to progress and develop as a practice. You may come from one of two places with regards to feedback. Either you're really more focused, you're focused in on the details and what's not working, what's not right. So you'll be giving typically negative feedback when you do give it. Or secondly, you're the other end of the scale, which is you're focused in on what works and what's working well, and you're continually giving encouragement and support, but avoiding giving the negative, difficult feedback on things that are actually not working. Now, it doesn't need me to tell you that actually, if you don't give feedback, what happens? Well, if you're focused in on the details all the time and always picking up on the things that are not good, then actually, it really wears people down. So it's like always focusing on this feedback that's negative. Eventually, people become a bit immune to it, become worn down by it, and it just becomes background noise. On the other hand, if you're only ever giving positive feedback, it avoids issues, and issues that can be really detrimental to the practice. So we have to actually give feedback on those specific issues as well. So ultimately, we have to give this combined feedback in the moment, when we see it, when we notice it, what's good and what's bad. We have to give both. So how do we avoid this? Well, you just have to give the time, pay attention. It's about what you observe and what you notice. And when you notice something that's good, give the feedback to the person about specifically what is good and what the impact is of it. When you notice something that's not good, give the feedback to the person at that time about that specific thing, about what's not good about it and the impact of that. So giving continual feedback, and change your lens. So if you typically give positive feedback, just imagine you're through the lens of a person who gives negative feedback. What have you noticed? If the other way around, if you typically give negative feedback, look through the lens of a giving positive feedback. Give it a balance, but give it as and when you notice it. And just really notice and comment on that specific thing that happened. So give time to give feedback. By not giving feedback, you are demotivating, i.e. people won't be contributing effectively to the success of your dental practice. So, number 2, not giving feedback. Number 3 is telling people what to do. Yep, but that's how you do it, surely. You've got to tell people what to do if you're a leader. Well, to an extent, I say this in terms of telling people what to do to kind of create a bit of a reaction. But if you think about it, this really actually almost comes from childhood for us, because when we're younger, our parents tell us what to do. Then as we grow older, gradually we don't want to be told what to do, because we want to be in charge of doing and having ownership for our own actions. But what tends to happen is that as we become adults, we then sometimes become parents ourselves, and ultimately that is like then when we become a leader and we go into this mode of what our parents did was we tell people what to do. The reality is that adults don't like to be told what to do. And the reason for that is because it takes ownership away from that person of their own ability to have control over their own actions and their own behaviours. So being told what to do starts to take it away from that person. Now, there are obviously going to be situations where you need to tell people what to do. However, there are a lot of situations where you don't have to tell people what to do. Look for opportunities to ask questions, to have the other person think about what they want to do. Transfer the ownership from you to them. Ask them what to do. Ask questions. Right? And that way, you're not telling them what to do, you're inquiring them in their to get them thinking about what they want to do to contribute to the success of your dental practice. So number 3, demotivating behavior is telling people what to do. Okay, number 4. Number 4 is not listening. Yep. I've written a previous article about this, about not listening. And yep, pretty straightforward, I think. Yet, it's something that people often do, which is not to listen. And it is incredibly demotivating for people. It's not rocket science to realise, but just to repeat, actually if we don't listen to people, they feel like their voice is not heard. And therefore they feel that they are not valued. They won't contribute with their voice to the running of the practice, to the success of the practice, and ultimately it's highly likely that actually they'll leave because they don't feel valued in any shape or form. If we listen, we are showing that their voice means something. So not listening really demotivates people. 2 specific exercises that you can do to help this, which are as follows. Number 1 is don't interrupt. Sounds easy, but I can tell you, people interrupt all the time. Especially as leaders, we interrupt. So don't interrupt. That's the first one. Really keep a check on yourself. Allow the person to finish. Just be curious and wanting to understand what they have to say. The second one is to just really seek to understand and listen. Okay? To take the time to listen. The second one is around avoiding the writing reflex, which means you'll constantly be wanting to say, but this is how you should do it, this is how to do it, this is how not to do it, this is how to do it. Try and avoid that and wait for the other person to say how they are going to do it. So 2 exercises, number 1, not interrupting, and number 2, avoid the writing reflex. That will help you really listen. Number 5 is incentivizing people for something they either love to do or that is creative. Right? So just repeat this. Number 5, demotivating thing to do is incentivizing people for things that they love to do or that is creative. In the past, it was pretty simple. We felt, or researchers felt, it was carrot and stick. Humans responded to either being given an incentive to do something. If you gave them an incentive, they'd do it. If you gave them a punishment to stop doing something, they wouldn't do it. Simple as that. It's not as simple as that. And recent research over actually the last 20 odd years or even more has shown that it's not as simple as that. And that actually we have to be really careful in what we incentivize, because can it not only be a waste of money, it can actually have a detrimental impact on the behaviors of people. Now it is complex, so there are still times and places where it's appropriate to give incentives. Now the first one of those is actually what I tried to refer to in the beginning, which is about mechanistic versus creative work. It has been shown in various studies that actually where the creative work is required, that if we incentivize people, people actually get to an effective solution slower and actually not as good a solution if we incentivize people when it's creative work. So where it's creative work, we don't want to incentivize people with what we call contingent incentives, meaning that if you achieve this, you will receive a reward. Non-contingent rewards are slightly different in that they are, at the end of something, you give someone a reward for what they've achieved, but they never knew there was a reward there in the beginning, and you don't do it in a consistent basis so people aren't always expecting it, actually those rewards can still be really effective. Contingent rewards can be effective in mechanistic work, meaning repetitive work where there's no new creative thinking required, and that it's just about doing specific tasks and giving an incentive for doing those tasks and nothing else, can be quite effective still. So when it's mechanistic work, that can be appropriate. All right. So this is the first area. The second area to think about is where people have a real internal, intrinsic drive and motivation to do a task. Various research has shown in this situation that where this is the case, where people like doing a task just for the sake of doing the task, for the challenge or for perhaps the love of it, whatever it might be, they just intrinsically like doing the task. Actually giving people an incentive in that situation takes the love and joy out of doing the task. So if you actually do that, you will likely reduce the motivation and the efficiency and the productiveness of how that person does that task. So essentially, if somebody really has something they love to do, don't incentivize them to do it, because it actually won't work. To give you two examples of this, the first one I thought is in a dental practice is of, let's say, a treatment coordinator. Yeah, so do we incentivize a treatment coordinator? Well, is it mechanistic work?